Hello and welcome to EPR with your favorite environmental enthusiasts, Nic and Laura. On today's episode, Laura and I discuss movie tropes. We talk to Sunny Fleming about moving, WOTUS United States, and the National Seed Strategy. And finally, we all know that humans are approximately 75% water, but did you know that a jellyfish and a cucumber are each 95% water? Yeah, how about that? Laura's not here to answer, so you just got me. That's all we got. Hit that music. NAEP just wrapped up hosting its advanced NEPA training at their annual conference, and if you missed it, fear not. NAEP will host the advanced NEPA training virtually on August 23rd from 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time. This workshop will benefit those professionals who work in related natural resources disciplines, who work with federal land management or real estate transactions, federal agency projects, or permitting and transportation or other infrastructure projects with a NEPA review component. Check it out at www.naep.org. Sorry, folks, Laura isn't here today to make me do a funny sponsor bit. I'm devastated, as you can tell. But please do head on over and check out our sponsor options. We are about to hit 40,000 downloads, which is awesome. And it's a really great opportunity to reach out to your target audience. And please check that out at www.environmentalprofessionalsradio.com. Let's get to our segment. But yeah, I know we're talking about movies and like the trend over time with movies and like Netflix, like they say, like our word of the day is fine for whatever reason. That's their word of the day. That's what they're making. Movies that are fine. They're not great. They're not bad, but people will put them on and be like, well, it was okay, I guess. You know, that's the standard like
background
right now.
Visuals.
Pretty much
on while I scroll Instagram.
Yeah, and the only movies that are really getting funding are, you know, blockbuster superhero movies, franchises. So, you know, we just had, you know, like I think Super Mario just blew up. So there's stuff like that, but there's no, like the A24 is holding down the art side of the movie house, and that's pretty much it. I'm being a little dramatic, but the movie landscape's different. How people consume it is different. And, you know, like I say, we talk about comedies. Like there hasn't been like $100 million comedy in like a decade or more. Yeah. It's been a long time since that happened.
Well, these production houses, they're in the business of making movies, not making a movie. So they're spitting them out, and, you know, it shows, I think, you know, that they just aren't like you said, they're fine.
Yeah. There's so many examples of that. There's just generic, bland movies that Netflix is making. They're not winning awards. They're not doing anything. It's just there. So it's an odd model. I would love for them to make good ones again. That would be great. And I don't want to sound like an old fart either, where I'm just saying, back in my day, we made movies, you know, because it doesn't mean there aren't good movies, but just there aren't. The way movies are made is very different now than it was.
I think it's just entertainment in general. There used to be, you know, MGM, Paramount, and two other Hollywood studios, and they made the movies. That's what you watched, and everyone watched the same movies.
Yeah.
Now everything's been done. There are 4 million. Every city wants its own production. Atlanta's trying to blow up. New York State's doing all kinds of things for incentives. Everyone wants to have their own hub for movies. Mm-hmm. So it's like music. There's no mega pop stars anymore. There's too many channels. There's too many avenues.
Yeah.
You know, everyone can. So it's good on one hand. It gives lots of people more opportunities.
Yes.
So it makes a lot more people opportunity to be actors or get some level of fame. But for any one person to become mega famous or a movie to be mega blockbuster, there's just too much competition for our attention.
Yes. Yeah. And our attention is shorter and shorter as well. So it's hard to sit in a theater sometimes for a couple of hours. And that's a big shift. Like I say, like when we do TikTok and it's like, you know, they're 30 seconds long and I'm like, next, you know, and you have options and choice. Like the power of choice sometimes is overwhelming, but it's there and you don't get that with movies. And so I don't know. It's almost like the Netflix's model though is like, let's just make as many movies as we can that appeal to the broadest audience possible, which there's no risks, there's no challenges, there's nothing that pushes the envelope.
Well, so there's a huge, there's people who are connoisseurs of movies and they want to see only good stuff. And then there's a mass of people who will watch all of them.
Oh, of course.
Regardless of whether they're good or bad, they just watch them. Yeah. And so, they're feeding the machine. And that's what we get is this like, okay, well, someone will watch this. Let's make it.
No, it's usually me, honestly. Like I love blockbusters. I've watched like a lot of the I'm tired of the Marvel movies now, actually, truthfully. And like I'm their core like audience. They want me to love them. And I'm just like, you guys keep doing the same movie over and over again. I'm getting tired of it. So that's not good.
Yeah.
But like, it's just, it's a very different system, very different ecosystem now. But yeah, very good point though. I like that.
Yeah, it's interesting. We'll see what happens. I mean, now there's the whole argument of AI and movies actually written by people, and will AI write the movies better?
Yeah. I mean, like as people knowing writers that are good. No, I don't think so. I think there's still is wonderful stuff that we're ways off from that being a full thing. But I bet you studios will start trying to use it to write generic scripts for like action movie 2, the search for more action. And, that'll be how it comes out. And some of them will make money. But, it's like, there's adages about like how every story has already been told. We see a lot of that, And like there's
exactly the hero story is the basis for every story. So the formula is already there.
Yeah. And, it's almost like you can do it beat by beat. And, people complain about critics not liking certain things, right? Like why are critics, really hammering on these movies? And usually the reason is because they've seen all the movies and they don't get surprised very often. So when they do get surprised, it's kind of like, wow, this is wonderful. And I think with 3 Billboards is an example. It's a movie that's really, really tough, handles really dark material. But the end of the movie is really surprising. And it's just kind of one of those things that like how they ended it is not the trend. There's supposed to be, I mean, I don't want to spoil it for people, but it's been a while, right? There's supposed to be this revenge element of it and satisfaction to like, you got the bad guy, you took care of it, took it into your own hands, but that's not what it is. It's a movie about forgiveness and love. And it's a weird way that works.
But this movie wasn't a blockbuster, right?
No, but it was a good movie.
Right. But that's so Donald Miller, who wrote Storybrand, which is amazing, talks about all of this and how to parallel marketing with like the formula for movies and the hero's journey. And he specifically mentions how like when you go off the script of what people expect and the journey that we want to see, then you end up with indie films. And you do get films that they can be good, but they don't have the mass appeal. Like we've been conditioned. And speaking of AI, we're just conditioned to see and be looking for the elements of the story in a certain format that has been handed down to us from generations. Mm-hmm. And Marvel has that down. Star Wars has that down. Like they've all got it down, but now we're getting bored with it. So it's like, what else is there?
Yeah, exactly. And you think about the trends, like superhero trend, like is you could look back at that movies in the like late 90s, early 2000s that really started like pulling the hero's journey. It's like, why don't we use heroes for the hero's journey? And they're like, oh, what a great idea. What if we tell a full story that's, 20 movies long? But yeah, I think so that wasn't a thing. They weren't the mainstream. Now they are. And, it's like everything else. It's going to ebb and flow. I think we're hitting a point of like maximum superhero. We're like overdoing it. I mean, I'm getting tired of it. I haven't seen the most recent ones, and that's like shocking to me. Like I'm supposed to like these.
Yeah. But gaming, I think gaming is the next where it's at.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of that. That's like
what's that one? All of Us, something.
Last of Us.
Last of Us.
I'm very cool, by the way. Oh my gosh, Laura.
I don't do zombie stuff.
I know. That's perfect, though. I love it.
But yeah, we should probably end it there because people will know how little I know. But
no. That's good, though. I love it.
But yeah, games are next, I think.
There we go. Yep. Tune in next time.
Let's get to our interview segment. What are we doing next?
Interview. It's an interview usually after these. Hello and welcome back to EPR. Today we have the queen of Esri GIS on the show. Welcome back, Sunny.
Wow, I got a promotion. Thank you.
There you go. I figured.
Nice. I'm really excited to be back.
Yeah, and before we dive all the way into our environmental topics, what's new with you? What's going on?
Wow, what's new? Well, I wonder if we'll get any bird chatter on the recording today because I'm sitting outside on my new porch. And it's new because it's attached to my new house.
Hey.
And that new house is attached to a new piece of land that, I now live in Asheville, North Carolina. I decided, I'll start with the GIS early on. I queried, what places can I move to that rhyme with Nashville? And Asheville was the only thing that came up. And so, I guess I'm here now. So,
yeah, that's why I usually move too. I'm like, well,
yeah. I needed a new name, but like not too new.
Yeah, I got you. That's very funny.
Is it?
No, it's not. It's terrible. No. So you've had to do so you moved to a new place. That's always kind of daunting. And the area you have, I guess, some friends that are there, but like, what about the house? The house is new, or are you doing some work to it? Or?
The house had been abandoned for about a year. Okay. And it was built in 1963. Mm-hmm. And then everything that went into it in 1963 never left it. Okay. So, yeah. And how we found it. So my husband had been in town and we were already kind of looking, but not really seriously. Like maybe that weekend we had decided finally to do this. And so we were just kind of like seeing what was on the market, and you know how that goes. So the realtor, he'd seen some houses around town and they were just all terrible. And then as he was actually on his way back home on the interstate, the realtor called and was like, hey, this house just came on the market. It's in this great neighborhood, needs some TLC, blah, blah, blah. You know the story. Mm-hmm. So he turns around, he goes to check it out. And we were like, I hadn't seen it. I just saw pictures of it. And so we decided to do it. And we were the first offer in, and we got accepted like in less than 24 hours. And yeah. And then as soon as we closed, we put a new roof on it because it was just like falling in basically. And then ripped the carpet out from 1963 that was pink shag.
Oh,
yeah.
No.
Talk about wearing a mask, man.
Oh my gosh.
It was rough, but now it's awesome. I have brand new hardwood floors. I have a new kitchen. I have a livable space. The downstairs still needs work. It's like you walk downstairs into a time capsule of 1963. But yeah. So
that's great though. So now that we know everything's going really well, do you want to talk Sackett? Are you ready for that?
Oh man, I have been ruminating on it all week. Fewer things from the SCOTUS have gotten under my skin so much as this.
Interesting.
I think, yeah.
And just, I should do this before that. If people don't know, this is a Sackett ruling for the waters of the United States. So
If people don't know, then please grab the handle on the bottom of your rock and lift it up and crawl up from your underground home. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, there were 4 opinions, first of all, which is crazy.
So, and I haven't even read them all yet.
There's different things. There's a couple of things going on with it. I think it's been one of those things. If you look at like the history of waters in the United States, right? You look at like just even in the last 5 years, us trying to define what it is. I was describing it the other day. It's like that, murder mystery where you're trying to find this killer and you've got like the lines going everywhere. That's what it's been like, right? It's a mess. So it's an interesting
thing. Mess.
Why is it a mess?
I think it's a mess because I don't know, man. I wish Fred were on right now because I'm like dying to riff with him on this.
I know,
because he has an actual, applied understanding of this, whereas I have a peripheral understanding of this as someone who, just stayed at a Holiday Inn last night and wants to be a lawyer. And I think that it's a mess because, a couple reasons. So first of all, I think the reason I love reading legalese is because it's so poetic in some ways, right? It's semantic.
Right.
And so then lawyers, basically their jobs are to interpret semantics. Mm-hmm. And when we look at the Clean Water Act and we look at really any law that's related to something environmental, we are attempting to define appropriately or in some way that makes sense or captures what we mean natural systems that are very difficult to define. And especially when we're talking about water. I mean, did no one remember the lesson from 3rd grade on the water cycle and how, it evaporates, it makes clouds, it rains, it pools, it moves around. Like this stuff is interconnected, y'all. How are we going to try and explicitly define the boundary of water. That's the dumbest thing ever.
It is really, but it's part of why it's gone back and forth so much,
It's exactly why it's gone back and forth so much.
Yeah. And it's very frustrating. And like, we've had a couple of different rulings where they're, significant nexus, talking about, there needs to be a defined scientific rule or requirement that we're following.
I want to petition the significant nexus. If Fred Wagner has a vanity plate for his car, I want it to be significant nexus.
Signex.
Signex. Man, I might get that. I'm going to scoop him on that, but I just imposter. Man.
Yeah, you're on here first. So, but like, it's funny because like in some ways, like it's definitely, like I say, it's a step backwards. It's clearer, I would argue. For better or worse, it is clearer.
For worse.
Yeah, you're right.
And that's what baffles me too. So I can understand when someone has made a legal decision that I may not necessarily agree with, but still has some kind of understanding behind it. But for me, this particular ruling has left me scratching my head because it is so well documented what the purpose of clean water or what the benefit of clean water has for all of us, not just on our health, but on our economies. But here's the thing, though. One thing I've been ruminating on all week is we're all on this like doom and gloom train around the federal ruling here. But we also have this thing called the 10th Amendment, which this SCOTUS loves to lean into, that 10th Amendment, where states and local communities can also have their own policies. And so there's two things here that I'm watching are what communities and states that were maybe relying on the Clean Water Act to protect themselves, how much like new policy are we going to see around this? But then in states that maybe have already better protections, or at least, to some level, more stringent protections than the Clean Water Act, are we going to see this pattern where those regulations are going to be more aggressively attacked? I feel like in many cases, they're always under some scrutiny at some level anyways. So those are the two things I'm going to be kind of looking out for.
Yeah. And, I think it's really easy in some states, right? California, for example, I could tell you right now, they're good.
Yeah.
But there's others, like you say. I think that's going to be kind of fascinating because that was part of what the ruling was. Hey, all right, well, this is what we're going to say, but you guys...
Y'all decide. We're intellectually lazy. You do it.
Well, we tried twice. We tried 8 times. We're done. So, but I don't know. Is that going to, there's always GIS lens that we talk to you about when it comes to this. So is this ruling going to impact the way you guys do work with you?
You're getting me fresh on these thoughts because I'm definitely, there's two sides of me, right? There's the part of me that has to have my kind of external facing, what do I say to the community? And then there's my personal feelings, I think a little bit of which I've let be expressed already. And so I am thinking about what is the silver lining here? And I do think for both communities and states that either do or do not have policies, first of all, there's already this movement right now to modernize existing processes.
Right.
And GIS has a role there. I mean, if you are an environmental agency and you're not using GIS, then what are you doing?
Right.
The environment happens across a geography. Therefore, your entire business is tied to geography. For communities that don't have anything established right now, they have an opportunity to build a program from scratch and learn some lessons. And that in many ways can be easier than untangling existing processes. And again, this is going to be underpinned by technology, and that technology should absolutely be geographic in nature. I think part of this, and this is a little Pollyanna or a little naive of me, I think in many ways we have failed to tell a nationwide story of wetlands.
Right.
We have some existing data sets, right? Like we have the NWI, we have NHD, but we all know that they're imperfect and that, if you are an environmental professional at all and you're relying on that for your delineations and your permit applications and your whatever else, then you're doing it wrong, honey.
Yeah.
So that alone, I think, tells a really powerful story. And how can we come together as a community and look at, okay, how do we tell a better story around this? How do we better illustrate the extent of wetlands?
Yeah.
Do we have standards that rely on something other than the Corps to do this? No,
we don't. Yeah.
And should we as a community? Yes, I think we should. I think there's some really basic stuff we can come together on to help illustrate nationwide a better story of our wetlands, and therefore also the impact that they have on our communities and our lives. Because right now, we can't really tell that story across a geography at scale and illustrate to people who may not care about wetlands on a day-to-day basis why they should.
Yeah.
And that's a problem.
Yeah. And it's, for me, it's easy to say, for example, like, if you get rid of these, then, flooding gets worse, right? And that's just universal fact. It's true. That's what they do. They soak up water.
Yeah.
Just build on top of it, and guess where the water is going to go? Right on top of what you built. That's just how it works. That's why there's a reason the water's there, right?
Yeah.
It's very easy to say it. It is very hard for people to care about, a wetland that's not in their backyard, that's not directly impacted.
No. Yeah.
Cities like, I think, like, what's it like when it rains? And they'll be like, man, it stinks. Everything floods. And you're like, why is that? That's the problem. They won't be able to answer it.
It has nowhere to go. And something I see a lot of too, right, is you have, and not all developers are like this. So it's like hashtag not all developers.
Right.
But some are just interested in their development, and they aren't interested in the impacts that their impervious surfaces have on the downstream neighbors. So how many times have we seen lawsuits by existing neighborhoods whose flooding have been exacerbated because a new development has been put in upstream? We see that all the time. And, some developers are sensitive to it and care about it, and others aren't. I think, if I'm being my most honest self, I really feel like this particular ruling, I don't know, maybe I'm being really cynical here, but I just feel like this particular ruling is very much in the interest of people who just want to build unfettered.
Yeah.
And
it is, it does take, like you say, it's a step back towards.
It's a step back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There is,
and it's not good for anybody. Not even the Supreme Court. They live somewhere. They got to drink water.
I know. And I think, but it's going to matter state by state, because some states will take the ruling and say, well, that stinks, but we're going to do what we've been doing.
Yeah.
And some states are like, we can finally build on this, the road, the river that we always wanted to build on. And then it's going to be a challenge when those things flood. And then who pays for the repairs for the things? And we go on and on. But,
I've been ruminating on that one all week. That one, it legit has me feeling down.
I know. And it's
usually I come out of these things and I have something really bubbling.
I was about to say, I was like, usually there's a spin on it, but I know it's challenging, and it's
my spin on it. If I have to be really optimistic, I do think that this is an opportunity for us as communities to come together and strengthen what we do at a local level. I want that to be the opportunity, and I hope that's what happens.
Yeah. And, a lot of what the reason the laws we have in the first place, where they came from, is community level involvement.
Yeah.
So there is some of that. It's just like, now we have to do that.
Man, I just wanted to go out to dinner. I didn't want to have to go care about my local politics.
I know, but you do, I think it's more important now than ever. Like, we have to
of course.
engage, It's easy to say, but it's also easy to live your life, and just like, well, that stinks for Houston. I don't live in Houston, so I don't need to fix the problems there. And people do that all the time, Yeah. But anyway, I'm going to take a quick pause here too, because Sam does want us to clarify what SACIT, the ruling is officially. So I'm going to see if I can find.
Just an unfortunate last name.
Yeah.
But I tried looking it up, and it was just like a bajillion pages. And I'm like, I just want Cliff Notes version of what happened. We need Fred.
Well, I think Sunny could do it.
Have you all done? Well, no, because I think there's it was funny. I'm sure people do. They probably have their entire theses on the history of the Clean Water Act.
Yeah, goodness.
But I think that's if you haven't done it already, that would be a great Fred podcast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're going to do that for sure.
Yeah, that'd be
I think we can give so again, and we can tie this back to what I was saying earlier for those that don't know. Basically, the Sackett ruling, the case itself, like I say, we'll leave that to Fred because it's an interesting case by itself. And actually, one of the quirks of that ruling was everyone unanimously agreed that in that case, they were able to do what they needed to do. But we'll leave that for Fred and tackling all that. What comes out of it is basically waters of the United States, as defined now, are going to be, it's navigable waterways. And really, it's even simpler than that. Wetlands that are not connected to a navigable waterway are not waters of the United States, do not need to be protected the same way. That's pretty much it. That's the ruling.
Which is fascinating in and of itself. Connected when?
Yes, which is always the problem.
Yeah. Again, water moves people. 3rd grade.
It does. It does. And that's one of the challenges with the act has been the need for studies and requirements to figure out if it's connected to something. And now you don't have to do that anymore. And so whether that's really that difficult, it really does depend on where you are and what you're looking at. But now, currently, the ruling is you do not have to look at wetlands that are not connected physically, obviously, by a water body. So it's got to be pretty apparent that they're connected for it to be a wetland that you cannot impact. Yeah. And the other thing they said was, it's cool if states want to have their own rules.
Yeah.
And that's where we are with Sackett.
Can they say otherwise? Isn't that the 10th Amendment? States, of course, states can say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And they will. And but it is.
They will. And some do. And actually,
California is a big one. Yeah.
California is a big one. And, I just moved to North Carolina from Tennessee. And man, I got to say, Tennessee's got some excellent water rules.
Oh, it's so weird. North Carolina doesn't have any, does it? Oh, it's so strange. I had no idea.
Well, no, I don't know what North Carolina has, actually.
It's not great.
I was actually looking at the Environmental Law Institute put out, they always put out these great reports and summaries and stuff. And I've been mapping that. I've been mapping the reports to try and get a nationwide handle on this. But yeah, I still don't have my head around it. Again, I've been ruminating on it fresh this week. Haven't we all? Right? It's not like I got a week's head start on anyone else.
No.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been kind of a wild and challenging one. I think long term, it's just going to matter one place to another. There's going to be different people that handle things different ways. Which shouldn't surprise anyone. It's kind of how we've been doing things. And I think that we're going to see a theme of that throughout the year. Truthfully, I think, as our NEPA regulations come through, those are going to be also kind of agency by agency specific, I think. So a lot's happening. A lot is going to happen in that regard. Yeah. So, hey, more to come for sure. So it's not all doom and gloom, right? It's not the only thing you wanted to talk about today.
It's not all doom and gloom. I do have optimism in other areas. So, yeah.
Okay. So you wanted to talk about the national seed strategy and how it relates to GIS. And I would love to know, I know I've heard it, but what is the national seed strategy in general? And
so I'm fascinated by this topic because I first learned about it when I read the infrastructure bill. I didn't know it was a thing, but in the infrastructure bill, there's a little line item. I wish I remembered exactly what it said, but I remember thinking, that's cool. There's a national seed strategy.
Right.
And so since then, I've researched it a little bit, and the bottom line, so there's actually other line items in the infrastructure bill that talk about native plants and native species and things like this. And some of them are related to restoring abandoned mine lands and efforts to try and use native species for these restorations. Makes sense, right? How many years have we been, lining road rights of ways with non-native species and, causing all sorts of issues with invasive species in our wetlands and our stream sides and our, all sorts of places. Native species are a huge problem. They cost us billions of dollars to tackle, and it's a sorely underfunded initiative. So the National Seed Strategy, in many ways, is an initiative to just stop planting non-native stuff. But right now, the easiest thing to purchase is non-native species.
Right.
That's the biggest market. So the National Seed Strategy, in a way, is an initiative to develop a market for this. And not only a market, but a supply chain.
Right.
So that supply chain requires experts who understand native plant populations to go out and be collecting these things, We can't plant things here in North Carolina that grow naturally in California because they'll die, and vice versa. Right. So they have to be regional, and that's a huge region. But even, southeastern species versus northeastern species, even if they're the same species, they're different. They're acclimated differently. They have different genetics. So all of this has a really awesome underlying spatial component to it. We have to know where seeds came from.
Yeah.
What populations. We have to know what greenhouse maybe they went to be planted out. We have to understand then where they were sold to go be planted. And then also, were those plantings successful?
Mm-hmm.
So it is really, and that's a really kind of simplified version of this, but we also think about this, it's just supply chain.
Right.
So the National Seed Strategy is an initiative to create the supply chain and have kind of a national strategy around the collection of these seeds to develop a market for these things, so that when we have policies around conserving and protecting and restoring our lands with native species, we can actually do it feasibly.
Right.
So I find it fascinating. I'm super interested in this topic right now. And then, of course, immediately, my mind goes to all of the ways in which geospatial tools can help us manage and instigate this and really move it forward. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, no, I think it's super cool. It's funny that this seems to make sense. Like most companies, most businesses, most everything, cost is the only thing. The easiest thing that costs the least is what I want.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so if we don't have that with national seed banks, then we should, because that makes total sense. We should do that.
Yeah.
Long term, it makes things a lot easier, truthfully. That stuff grows well there because that's where it's from.
Yeah.
You don't have to dump tons of fertilizer.
Much more beneficial. Yeah. For everything.
For everything. Yeah.
So yeah, I'm fascinated by that topic. So I've been kind of tracking that. I'm really kind of in the early stages of my learning and my understanding on it, but yeah, more to come there. I'm going to learn more about it. I've got some folks on my list to, give some cold calls to and be like, what's going on with this? What's this about? So
tell me about seeds, I hope.
Yeah. Tell me about seeds.
That's really cool. And it's like, I don't know. We've also talked a lot about sustainability. We're talking about corporations really already. So corporate sustainability, we've had, Matt Seckel on. Those are great episodes. Go listen to them and listen to him talk about it. But I think, we're talking about this corporate sustainability, and you think that that's going to basically accelerate and innovate conservation research. And when I read that in my head, I'm like, how is that going to work? And so I pose that to you. What do you mean, Sunny?
So this is where a lot of my optimism is coming from right now, actually. I'm really fascinated by this. And I'll caveat this by saying, right, it's not a caveat, it's an observation. A lot of my friends that are in conservation and that are environmental professionals, when they think about corporations having some kind of interest in conservation, it can be skeptical, it can be cynical, and I don't blame them. That said, I think if we have an opportunity to do really awesome conservation because it's driven by some sort of capitalist motive, then I'm still like, hell yeah, because we still need the money and we can still do conservation.
Yeah.
So what I'm fascinated about right now is, and there's all this sorts of different frameworks. And if we look at the UK, they're a bit further along in this than we are here in the US. But one of the frameworks, and I will have to look up the acronym right now. So let's look up the acronym. This is the beauty of doing these. All right. So one of the frameworks that everyone is really talking about right now is the TNFD framework. So this is the Task Force on Nature-Related Financial Disclosures. And what corporations, they're really looking at this right now because it goes beyond hey, this is a feel-good thing that we should do. And it's starting to move into more of an actual policy. Mm-hmm. So I have been hearing more questions from corporate and private businesses asking about, hey, how can we do this? How can we support this? How can we ask questions about biodiversity? How can we invest in conservation? Where do we need to invest? What do we need to invest in? And so this is starting to drive a really interesting topic around, well, we need data, and the people who gather this data are environmental professionals.
Mm-hmm.
And we gather it in a few different ways. Sometimes it's gathered during a permit process, and then it goes into a PDF that dies, and that data is not being used for other purposes. So that's a currency that we see environmental consultants not taking advantage of. They're just putting their data into a permit application. They're not really actually putting it into a GIS that could then be used to help model things.
Right.
Or ask other questions of it, or understand, hey, we have a lot of wetlands that we delineate for these permits. Can we use that data to understand then for our mitigation folks in this other program where they might want to target mitigation?
Yeah.
I don't think I've seen anyone doing this yet. Yeah. So I'm really excited about this discussion coming from corporate entities, because it's starting to drive a discussion around data and data gaps, what limitations we have, what we don't have, what are the challenges, and they have the money to invest in it.
Right. For sure.
And so I feel our responsibility as an environmental community is to start coming together on this topic and really getting a handle on what are we going to be asked and what can we answer and what can we not answer. And I think we need to really get ahead of this and understand it. And also not only understand it, but be prepared to answer those questions. And again, a technology strategy there is key. And this is something that happens across a landscape. And therefore, geography and GIS tools are going to be crucial to this and to us taking advantage of this opportunity. So that's my big optimism right now.
Yeah. And I mean, like, obviously there's benefits for it. And there's certain areas you probably will never get information from. There's just certain, like military installations, for example, you're just not going to get it. And honestly, you probably don't need it. For grand scheme of things, what they're building on their installations doesn't really generally apply to other places. But like, I think it's really cool to, can you imagine like the amount of wetland delineation that happens that just no one knows has already happened?
Yeah.
I mean, just in my head that
what we could know. Yeah. What we could have in a centralized national data set, how we could all be contributing to the NWI with the work that we're doing.
Oh, I know, which would be really cool.
Because they need help. They need help.
Yeah, I know. It's a hard program.
Fish and Wildlife Service. I absolutely love y'all. I want to help.
Yeah. and it would be really cool. And like, honestly, that probably would be the way that it would have to be. Like, what other workforce can we pull from that's already in mass, right? How many thousands and thousands of environmental professionals are out there delineating wetlands? Right. And like field notes or whatever. Yeah. I mean, it's the information. Well, I shouldn't say, I don't know. Yeah. or whatever. Or on paper still. Oh gosh. Yeah. I actually had a project once where they, it was a jurisdictional determination was done like in 1992. Nice. And they're like, well, we know where the wetlands are. And I'm like, okay, that's great. I need to put it on a map. They're like, here's the map. And it was someone drew. Basically, it looked like the continent, Africa. That's what it looked like. And I was like, I mean, I see where you like scriggled in buildings and but like, you really literally think that's it? It's like, we got to go out there and confirm that. I'm sorry to tell you that that's not good enough. I'm dying to geo-reference that. I hope you still have that image. I don't anymore, but it wasn't too far wrong, but it was wrong. Yeah. Shocking. It was wrong. I know. Yes, and that's just one example. Right. Yeah. Wetlands is just one example. I'm kind of sticking with the theme here, but it's interesting. These corporations are basically asking two questions fundamentally. One is, how do natural hazards and the environment and issues with that impact our business, right? Mm-hmm. Supply chains, things like that. Okay, that's a real obvious one, right? Right. Yeah. But they're starting to ask the other questions, though, of like, how are we impacting the environment and exacerbating these things? And can we mitigate that? So they are looking at doing investments in all sorts of different conservation practices, whether it's wetland mitigations or whether it's other kinds of good faith, good practice type of things. And it's hard for us to answer that question of to be at the table as environmental professionals and say, you could do some mitigation here, but it would be more beneficial and you'd be able to tell a better story to your investors if you did it over here. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Because I mean, people do like a feel good story. I mean, generally.
Oh man, they love it.
Yeah. And if you're doing something, positive for a community, which a lot of this stuff actually can be, it's not even just that you're protecting wetlands. You can also make something educational. You can do, you're basically giving the community some sense of agency over the things that are going on in it. It's very, very cool. People love to be a part of something.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, that's really, really neat. Okay. So, all right. We're back on the optimism train. I like that.
We're on the optimism train. We started off sad, man.
I know. Well, it's
that's okay. It's an important topic. It'd be like the elephant in the room if we didn't get to it.
I know. Like we'll never talk about WOTUS. Yeah. I mean, well, we're not quite out of time, but we have enough time. Like, speaking of Matt, by the way, one of the things that's going on right now, there's a writer's strike, and I know I'm throwing this out at you.
Oh yeah.
Idea how you'll feel about it. There's a writer's strike going on right now. Totally fascinating. And one of the arguments is about the work that they're doing. And Laura and I were talking about movies and movie tropes and some of the challenges, like, some of the challenges with it. And like with the writer's strike going on and all the arguments that are going on between it. And for the record, me personally on the writer's side, shocking, I know, but
likewise.
Yeah. And I don't think ChatGPT can write a good movie, but could it write a Marvel movie? That's my question for you.
Could ChatGPT write a Marvel movie?
And no offense to Marvel movie fans, by the way, I watch them too. I love them. I'm just saying there's a theme.
I'm just going to say no. And here's why. Mm-hmm. So I have, for funsies, played with it, and I've asked it mostly academic questions. So I wanted to see, you've seen all these issues where people are kind of posting about what ChatGPT or other AI platforms come back with when you ask them questions about like socially relevant topics. So I wanted to ask it, okay, what do you think equity is as it relates to the environment? And it spit back just the EPA definition.
Right.
As if that is the only perspective on equity in the environment that exists.
Mm-hmm.
So my point being, and also when I was reading it, I was like, oh, I knew exactly where this came from. I knew exactly.
Yeah.
So anyway, so there was that, but I've also seen others. So there was, shout out to Arizona. Shout out to Arizona DEP. Megan, Megan Smart, who is amazing. She's the most appropriate last name ever. So Megan at NAEP, she did a love poem to Survey 123.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I was so tickled. And so I sent it to our product manager for Survey 123. I sent it to all of my industry buddies. And I was like, do any of your users have love letters to our technology? I mean, I was so excited about it, but this actually caused a really interesting conversation amongst my industry group because they're like, I could have ChatGPT write a blah, blah, blah. And I was like, nah. No, she has like super specific things in there. Yeah. So then we started experimenting with it. Like, can we get ChatGPT to write poems about X, Y, and Z related to Esri software? How lame is this, right? Like, do we have jobs? And the content that it was coming back with was just kind of like, meh.
Right.
You know, it wasn't exciting. So I think that, can it write a Marvel film? I don't know. Yeah. I don't think so.
I agree with you, truthfully. I think it's still no. And like I say, it still is really challenging. Dialogue in general is, I think, pretty challenging to write, especially jokes.
I said Arizona DEP. It's Arizona DEQ. I should know that. I can't memorize every state's acronym.
I know. They're all different. Is it Arizona? I thought it was DEP too, actually. So that's my fault.
Pretty sure it's DEQ.
Yeah.
Anyways, Megan's
right. Yeah, it is. You're right. We're both wrong. Yep. There we go. And, but it's funny though, because I don't know how on earth we haven't talked about this yet, but I want to close out talking about one of your hobbies. Mountain biking.
Mountain biking.
I don't know how on earth we have not talked about this yet, because it's like, I see you on, Insta all the time. Like, oh, I just did 1 billion miles and I'm kind of tired. I'm like, okay.
That's my husband's fault. Oh, man. Okay. So I remember on one of the first podcasts I ever did with y'all, I said, hobbies are my hobby. And it's so true. Hobbies are absolutely my hobby. Road cycling is my favorite, all-time favorite. I love road cycling. Here in Asheville, It's not the safest here for road cycling, as you can imagine, right? Little mountain roads, there's traffic, things like that. Mm-hmm. So unless you are like kind of far out, it's difficult to get a good road bike in. But mountain biking here is a lot more accessible and a lot more safe. So prior to moving here, we had a pretty good sense that whether it was Asheville or whether it was somewhere in the mountains, we were moving no matter what. Yeah. And so we took up mountain biking. My husband's always done it. That's his preferred. He would do road cycling with me, but he really prefers mountain biking. And he hadn't done it in years. So finally I like bought a mountain bike and I started doing the little baby trails in Nashville. And I was okay. I was comfortable with it, but I love being out in nature. And that's something that I don't necessarily get when I'm on the road bike. I mean, you're out in nature, but it's still like farmland. Yeah. It's just different. I'm not like going through a creek and down a trail and stuff. So I loved it. I didn't think I would love it, but I absolutely loved it. And so we've been doing it here a lot now. We just went to DuPont State Forest last week where my husband was like, we're going to do 8 miles. And I was like, great. Okay. I can do 8 miles. Like, yeah. Pretty sure it was 16 miles by the end of it. And it was amazing, but I cried. So there's mountains here. Imagine that we didn't have when I lived in Nashville, Tennessee. Asheville, North Carolina definitely has mountains. And so in order to go downhill, you must go uphill quite a ways. And I wasn't prepared for this at all. And the thing was like 16 miles. And I would say 7 miles of it, if not 8, were up the mountain. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. And at first it was like on this gravel road and it was kind of gentle. And I was like, this is fun. I can live. And then we stopped and we snacked at the corner and I thought it's almost over. I'm still happy. And we started on and continued. And I was like, oh, we're like still at the bottom basically. Mm-hmm. And then I just like broke down because it was so physically grueling. And so I had to like stop. And then this other guy came along behind us who's like amazing. So he just flew by me, which was demoralizing, of course. And then I had to stop again. And then because I had to stop again, and it was so mentally like taxing, I just broke down in tears. And my husband was like, are you okay? And I was like cursing at him. And I was like, you just go on ahead. But I finally got through it. And then the downhill is amazing. I love the downhill. I like to do little jumps. I like to do that stuff. I like to feel like I could die at any second.
That is how it is, actually.
It's how, I mean, I don't know. I haven't crashed yet, fingers crossed. And I don't know how, because it is absolutely terrifying. But there's something about it that I love. So mountain biking.
Really great. I love that. That was a great, that was perfect. Well, we are running out of time, but as always, I want to give you an opportunity for you to is there open forum? Is there anything you wanted to talk about that we didn't get to? Open forum.
My neighbor's going by. Yeah. I would say like right now we're recording this podcast a week out from the Sackett ruling. I've certainly been pretty down about it all week. But I want to encourage our community to keep their head up. I do think there's opportunity here. I think there's opportunity not only looking at kind of local and state policy level and keeping tabs on how they're going to react to this, but I think also really keeping an eye on what are corporations doing right now? What is this TNFD framework? How is that going to have an impact? And how can we start taking advantage of those interests to help fund conservation in a way that I suspect is unprecedented. Right. And I think that's exciting. So that's my optimistic note to end on is keep your chin up. I think there's still some really cool stuff coming for us that we can take advantage of.
Perfect. Couldn't agree more. So our very last question for you, where can people reach you if they want to get in touch?
Okay. Well, on LinkedIn, you can always reach out to me on LinkedIn. That is easily my best platform. On Twitter, I am Little Miss Esri. And then, of course, you can always just email me. So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Sunny, so much. Always a pleasure.
All right. Great to see you all. Bye.
Bye. And that's our show. Thank you, Sunny, for joining us today. It's always a pleasure. Please be sure to check us out each and every Friday. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. See ya, everybody. Bye.